Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Racist, lazy, mean federal worker gets her comeuppance. This story is about my son, who's a computer science whiz and a nice guy. Let's call him Will. Will was the youngest professor to teach at his university, which is a world-class university in the USA. Unfortunately, he's a bit pushover. Will had a job he really liked at a federal agency. He consistently received stellar reviews for 3 years and was given a great promotion. Will also had a great professional relationship with his boss, whom he respected. Let's call Will's boss Wendy. Will and Wendy are of opposite races, which was never an issue until the jerk, let's call her Charlene, began interfering. Will created an application for Wendy that would allow her to access statistical information on the performance of each division and all individuals under her management. That jerk, Charlene and Wendy are the same race. They are black, my son is white. My son faced accusations of nepotism by Charlene based on race, which was simply untrue. Will willingly worked overtime and worked outside the scope of his job at his boss's request without any extra pay. He was an exempt employee, but got special perks such as flex schedule, autonomy, and so on. There was a poor performer at the office who failed to meet the requirements by 70%. Let's call her Mina. That was Mina's failure rate. Mind you, Mina would go on Facebook and chat with her friends while on the job instead of just doing her work. Mina was the only person whose remote work privileges were revoked by her supervisor, Darla. Mina and Darla are also black. Mina discovered that Will had created a program that allowed Wendy, my son's boss, who was Darla's boss, to see the activities of staff while on the job. Mina also was found out to be committing wage theft, as sometimes/often she did not even work full days that she claimed. Again, Mina happens to be the same race as her supervisor, my son's boss, and the jerk. All black. Charlene gets wind of the application that Will had created for Wendy and complains that he sets it up to target employees who are black and that the federal government is engaged in a scheme to keep down her race, despite the fact that 80% of the employees in that office were of that race. Charlene demands that my son work for her office under the guise that they need a similar program. Will had no choice but to comply with the transfer as it was the agency's decision, and Charlene and others began harassing my son with racist comments. He ultimately lost his job. He filed an EEOC complaint and an investigation ensued. Charlene lies and perjured herself into her sworn statement. The federal agency initially tried to cover up her criminal behavior until my son threatened to have the FBI investigate the perjury allegations. The director got involved, as did other attorneys. The agency conducted the investigation and found that Charlie not only discriminated against my son based on his race and harassed him, which was illegal, but she also committed felony perjury and obstruction of justice. Needless to say, Charlene lost her job, in addition to being charged with felonies. Next story. Entitled Mother Delays Military Flights and Costs Government Thousands of Dollars. A little bit of background to help. I'm a US Marine who was recently stationed in Okinawa, Japan. So when you get stationed overseas, especially in Japan, there is a specific process to get everyone where they need to go with regards to flights. Basically, everyone and their families get put in flights to Seattle International Airport. Once there, it is usually an uncomfortable 4 to 12 hours of families and service members sleeping on floors throughout the terminal, and USO to wait for the 2 AM TSA screening and pre-flight check-in for the 7 to 8 a.m. flights. The flights from Seattle are traditionally government-contracted flights, so it's only military personnel and their families, and the planes only stop at military bases from there. So fast forward to the very first stop, mainland Japan. 15 hours of flying later, my wife and I, and my service dog Zoe, get off the plane along with all the other military families and pets. It's been a long flight. Everyone is irritated and grumpy and just wants to get everything over with. We have 2 more stops at different bases to let people off. Enter the entitled mother. She exits the plane with everyone else at our first stop. We have to sit in a staging area because seeing as we are now in another country, we can't go anywhere without going through customs. The entitled mother begins to loudly complain that the environment is not comfortable enough and that the air is too humid. Wow, in Okinawa? Who would have guessed? At this point, she's just been generally annoying, but everyone ignores her. We all boarded the plane no problem. We all really just want to leave and get to our final bases. Fast forward to our second stop. Around 2 hours of flying later, still on the mainland but closer to Okinawa. As we taxi towards our next stop at the terminal to drop people off, I get a snapshot from a Marine who used to work for me. He's on the runway and there is like 3 to 4 other planes with families behind us. It's pouring rain, but they are going to let us off the plane to stretch out legs again, while some of the families actually depart. Everyone stands up and gets ready to get off the plane when the pilot comes on the intercom and says, "We all have to be seated again." No explanation. I message my friend on the flight line and ask him if he knows what's going on. He says that the departing families have exited the plane, but that a spouse still on board was causing a problem. He comes up to the plane and I walk up to the front to greet him. Haven't seen him in 7 months. I begin to ask him what's going on. Re-enter the entitled mother. She's talking to the flight attendants along with a sergeant and staff sergeant. Her son, around 4 to 5 years old, had air sickness. Nothing more. Just a little nausea and a headache.
But he's not feeling good and he needs to see a doctor. Now! He can't breathe.
The staff sergeant tells her, "Ma'am, we've already had him looked at by a corpsman, a Navy medic for Marines. He's fine. We can just grab him some Advil or Tylenol for his headache and he'll be fine."
No! He has swollen glands. See?
She starts jabbing the kid in his neck with her bony fingers at this point.
"We're not leaving this plane until he receives medical attention. That's it."
The staff sergeant makes eye contact with me and my friend and just sighs and rolls his eyes. He can't even finish saying "ma'am" before she has an outburst over seeing this.
"I'm sorry. Is something wrong with me caring for my son? Get him a doctor. Now."
"Ma'am, it is after working hours. It's around 6:30 p.m. All official medical staff have gone home already. If we want to get him extra attention, I will have to call the emergency landing crew, shut down the runway, and have paramedics take a look at him. And that's just out of the question. You are not the only person on this flight, and your son is not the only person not feeling well. He will be fine." At this point, the entitled mother explodes, and she just keeps demanding that they shut down the entire flight line for her crazy self. Staff sergeant goes back and forth with her for a while, and my friend and I laugh as I shake his hand and go back to my seat. At this point, we're now 2 hours behind schedule thanks to this one person. But a 2-hour delay for us backs up the planes behind us even more. She finally takes her seat and we take off for another hour flight to our final stop, Okinawa. We land and she immediately starts up again, going on about how she's going to have their jobs and get them all punished and demoted. Everyone is ignoring her. My wife and I happen to be right behind her when she finally gets off the plane after berating the flight attendants at the front of the plane again. We get to the bottom of the stairs and she immediately turns to a random spouse and goes,
"Wow, not even my first day on the island and I'm already almost arrested." Off to a great start. Who knew being an Air Force wife would be so difficult? I really wish they had tried. They would not have had fun.
I look at her airman husband and he's just standing there trying to hide himself. Ashamed of her at this point, she then starts to harass the airman on airport security duty. A few minutes of her nagging the security officer about God knows what, I heard him say in a very loud commanding voice, "Ma'am, there is nothing to be done about your issue on the basis. That is not an issue. Please leave before I'm forced to take action." And her response to that? Woe spitting in his face. The other officer immediately tells her she's under arrest for assaulting a military officer and moves to put the shiny cuffs on her. She kinda manifested her arrest. We were the last plane scheduled to land on base in Okinawa that night. Thanks to this single woman, the entire staff at the airport had to stay longer. The customs officials had to stay longer, the flight/maintenance crew had to stay longer, along with the same exact staff for all of the other airports for the 3 to 4 planes that were behind us at the last airport. Next story. Neighbor gets expensive smart home appliances installed on Wi-Fi with no password, and call the police when I let them know that's bad. I remembered this story from a year or two ago while I was browsing for a spotlight I could turn on and off from my phone. Not related to the story, but my dogs wants to go to war with some foxes who keep accidentally turning the motion-activated spotlight, which Fuzzface considers dire provocation. I was messing around with a crappy laptop's Wi-Fi card and saw I had an access point I could connect to that wasn't there before. Signal was so-and-so, and I had my own internet, so I didn't really bother trying to use that one, so I sorta just forgot about it. About a week later, I was unplugging some stuff and accidentally unplugged my wireless router, and while it was unplugged, my phone found the next accessible Wi-Fi access point, which was the one I'd found previously and not really bothered with. Not my circus, not my monkeys, you know? Then my phone pops up saying I need to install all of these smart home apps to make the appliances work, which did not make sense. I'm enough of an IT guy to know that, unless there is a burning need for it, home automation isn't really the best idea. Absolutely no telling who can access that information. These people had their garage doors, heating and air conditioning, lights, interior and exterior, televisions and refrigerator hooked up. It was all hooked up to a Wi-Fi with no password. In the industry, we call that dumb as a pack of hammers. Once I plugged the router back in to appease the suddenly irate family members wondering where the internet went, I hooked up my dog and took him for a walk. Before I left the house, I installed the smart home app and turned on one exterior spotlight and then looked for the house it was attached to. Presumably, if I was able to use their Wi-Fi, they were in line of sight. Once I saw the light that was on, I turned it off to make sure. The house was on the next street over, directly behind my house. There is a huge hill in the way that the builders left because Mother Nature did not flatten my part of the country as a courtesy, so lots can be next to each other without being accessible. That meant going the long way around. My dog is an adorable 35 pounds cockapoo who has much better people skills than I do. When I have to go talk to people, I don't know, he comes along because he's about as threatening as a wet noodle. Don't tell him I said that. And I can't be that bad a man if my dog is as awesome as he is. So we make our way over to the neighbor's house, and I knock on their door. A nice older lady answers it. Old enough to have moved out kids, but not old enough to be considered a Q-tip in my humble opinion. She forgets to ask what I want and immediately goes gooey all over my dog. And her husband hears adorable appreciation sounds coming from his front door, and he decides to investigate. He too is floored by my dog's awesomeness. There is about a minute of him getting all the attention, and I thought building a rapport. Before I remember why I'm here, I ask how they like their new smart home stuff, and they immediately start getting weirded out. Husband says, "We like it just fine. How do you know we got that stuff?" Please do not take this the wrong way, but you don't have a password on your wireless. My phone connected to it by accident and told me about all the stuff you had installed. Wife cocks her head to one side, and the husband's brows start developing a thunderous quality. I start talking faster. "I'm just here to let you know that you really should put a password on your Wi-Fi, or anyone can use it to do stuff like open your garage doors." Husband's brow is now in full fury mode, and he opens his mouth to presumably shout at me. But before he can, the wife says, "Oh, that's what the installer guy was talking about. He kept saying I needed to encrypt the thingy or something like that. We've never bothered with a password because it's a pain to set up and remember." Now husband has gone from thunderous fury to bewilderment, and he looks at his wife and says,
Encrypt the what now?
"I don't feel like volunteering to set up these people's network and appliances for them. So I say, okay, gotta go, bye." I power walk away from their house, and once clear we mosey back towards my house. About 2 hours later, someone started knocking at the front door to my house. I live in an in-law apartment in the basement of my parents' house, so that's not my door. My mother answers the door and then stomps down to the door to my part of the house, throws it open and tells me the police are here. Again, in a frosty voice. I hustle up the stairs and there is Officer Dave. Not his real name, but the only officer my town at that point had who knew enough about computers to actually have a conversation with me without getting a must-smash nerd face. I say, "Hi Dave, what's up?" He cuts me off before I can even finish. "You promised me you were done with this nonsense after that whole Main Street thing. You promised, and now I look like a jerk." Whoever had set up the timing on the stump lights for the main road through my town after some pretty serious construction did an absolutely awful job, and traffic was just horrific. Me and a locksmith's friend decided to fix the problem after reporting the problem to town hall and it getting nowhere. We did not break anything. He picked the lock and I hacked the light, and then we locked up when we were done. We got caught on the last light. Only reason I didn't go to jail was because Dave backed me up and made everyone wait a day to see if traffic was better, which it was. I then promised him no more shenanigans. "What? I haven't done anything." I say to him, "Then why the hell am I getting calls about you opening and closing people's garage doors and turning their lights on and off?" To be fair, that did sound like the sort of thing I'd do. Not to break into someone's house just to mess with them. I'm mischievous, not evil. And then the light dawns. I point and ask, "Did you get called by the people living in that house?" Because I went over there a little while ago to tell them that they needed to put a password on their Wi-Fi. The only thing I did was turn on a spotlight to see which house it was. Nothing more than that, swear to God. They don't have a password? They're the sod as Dave face palms. I let out a yip in sympathy. He sighs and says, "Stay out of trouble," and I wave by. Turns out the husband called the police and gave a vague description of me and the dog and said that I lived nearby. And one of the other cops gave Dave a hard time about him cutting me slack before he drove out to talk to me. The couple got a call back to tell them that the issue is resolved and please secure your Wi-Fi. 2 days later, there is a password on their Wi-Fi and we all live happily ever after. Except for getting the stink eye from that couple whenever I walk by. I accidentally bumped into Dave about a week after that, and he told me he had to give the neighbors a stern warning about calling the police for no reason. And as he said it, involving the cops in petty arguments. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.